What if the way you love was never fixed at all, but only banked, like a fire waiting under ash for a kinder hand? Tonight, while you sleep, this book will tend that fire for you. Let it play softly through the night, for the deeper heart keeps listening long after the eyes have closed. Give it one night and you may wake to find that your heart will never love the same way again. The Night Hearth. Introduction. Every heart is a hearth. The old keepers of houses knew this without ever saying it, for they lived by a law the modern world has forgotten. A house is not warmed by its walls, its furniture, or its fine views. A house is warmed by one small fire kept faithfully in one room, and from that room the warmth travels outward through every stone. Your chest holds such a room. Inside it burns everything you have ever felt for anyone, the loves that blazed, the loves that dimmed, the loves you are still waiting to light. And here is the gentle truth this book was written to hand you. That fire has never once gone out. Hearts do not run out of love the way lamps run out of oil. They are only ever banked, covered over with the ash of old winters, waiting, sometimes for years, for someone to kneel down and breathe on them again. The kneeling happens at night. In the last soft minutes before sleep, your deeper heart opens the way a hearth opens when the house goes quiet, and whatever feeling you carry across that threshold is the fuel it burns until morning. Fall asleep in resentment, and the night banks resentment. Fall asleep in tenderness, and you wake with tenderness already warm in the grate. This is the whole method, and it asks nothing of you but your last few minutes. The fire you bank at night is the warmth you wake to. So let the day's cold stay at the door. Night after night, chapter by chapter, we will tend every corner of the house of your heart, and you will learn what the old keepers knew, that love is not a storm that strikes the lucky. Love is a fire that answers the keeper. Before we get into the book, comment "I am warm" to affirm your intention to the universe. Part 1. The Kindling of the Heart. Chapter 1. The Fire You Bank at Night. In the long corridors of an old manor, Marjorie Truelove had kept the fires for 40 years, and the last hour of her day was always the same. Room by room, she knelt at each hearth, raked the embers together, and laid the ash over them like a blanket over a sleeping child. The young maids thought she was putting the fires out. Marjorie knew better. "I am not ending them," she would say. "I am keeping them until morning." Her ash-dusted hands reveal the first law of the night hearth. A fire left blazing burns itself out by midnight, and a fire left scattered dies of cold, but a fire banked with care sleeps warm beneath its cover and wakes at the first breath of morning air. Your heart keeps the same physics. The feeling you carry into sleep is not lost in the dark. It is banked, held, and slowly fed, so that the heart you wake with is the heart you covered over the night before. Wilfred M. Bury, the parish clerk, learned this the cold way. For years he fell asleep rehearsing the day's slights, the sharp word from the vicar, the neighbor's snub, turning each one over like a man stacking wet wood. His mornings arrived gray and guarded, and he blamed his nature. Then he began Marjorie's practice, choosing one warm memory each night and laying himself down upon it, his wife's hand on his shoulder, the smell of the church at evensong. Within weeks, the man who had woken braced for battle was waking gentle, and his household, without being told a thing, gathered closer to him, the way people gather to a lit room. His changed mornings teach that you have been banking your heart every night of your life. The only question was ever what you covered over. Tonight, before sleep takes you, choose the ember. One moment of love, given or received, however small, however old. Hold it until you feel the first faint warmth of it in your chest, and then let the ash of drowsiness settle gently over it. Do not guard it. Do not check it. The night knows this work better than you do. And in the morning, before you rise, lay your hand on your chest and notice what is already warm there, waiting in the grate exactly where you left it. Chapter 2. The Hearthstone First. In a quarry town at the foot of Grey Hills, Sybil Hartwell cut hearthstones, and she turned away more customers than she served. People came wanting the widest slab, the grandest mantle, and Sybil would kneel and examine the stone they already had. A cracked hearthstone under a great fire, she told them, splits the whole floor. The stone must be whole before the fire can be generous. Her chisel and level reveal the foundation this entire book rests upon. The love you give to others sits on the love you keep for yourself, the way every fire sits on its stone. You were taught, perhaps, that tending yourself is vanity, that a good heart pours itself out and asks nothing. But a keeper who never warms her own hands drops the kindling, and a heart that despises itself gives a strange, cracked warmth, love with apology in it, love that asks forgiveness for existing. The stone is not selfishness. The stone is what makes the fire safe to sit beside. Horace Goodhart, the night watchman, had spent his life warming everyone but himself, first on his rounds, last at his own supper, a man who spoke kindly to every soul in town and brutally to the one in his own chest. When his knees began to fail, an old keeper on his route taught him the watchman's rule: warm your own hands first, or you will fumble the lantern everyone depends on. Horace began giving himself the first kind sentence of the day instead of the last. Within a season, the change was town talk, not because he did more, but because his kindness had stopped limping. It came out whole now, from a whole stone. His steadied lantern teaches that self-tenderness is not taken from your loved ones. It is the floor their fire stands on. Tonight, before the ember, lay the stone. Say one gentle sentence to yourself, in your own voice, the sentence you have been saving for people you love better than you love yourself. Then rest your fire upon it and sleep, and notice in the morning how much steadier the warmth sits when the stone beneath it has been leveled by a kind hand. Chapter 3. The Match and the Wind. In the match factory by the river, Elspeth Dovey dipped pine sticks into sulfur, and she taught every new girl the same first lesson, not about making matches but about striking them. Out in the yard, in the wind, the strongest match in the box dies before it is born. The girls learn to turn their backs to the weather, cup one hand around the flame, and give it a sheltered breath to take hold. Fire is not weak, Elspeth would say. Fire is young. Young things need a doorway. Her cupped hands reveal why so many of your tender beginnings have died at the striking. A new love, a new softness toward yourself, a new practice like the one you began last night. These are match flames, real but young, and you have been striking them in the wind, testing them in the middle of quarrels, announcing them into the gale of busy days and doubtful company, then mourning that they went out. Nothing was wrong with your fire. It was struck without shelter. The old keepers gave every young flame a windless minute first, and the windless minute was the whole secret. Alfred Winterbourne kept the coast beacon, and no man on that shore knew wind better. On the wild nights when the beacon mattered most, he did not fight the gale on the open platform. He lit his flame below, in the lee of the tower, in stillness he had built for exactly this purpose, and carried it up already burning. He began sheltering his affections the same way, offering his shy heart to his neighbor the schoolmistress not at the loud market, but in the quiet of the lending library. Within months, the two of them were walking the cliff path together, a lit thing, carried up into the weather only after it had caught. His leeward flame teaches that tenderness does not fail from smallness. It fails from exposure, struck one windless minute too soon. Tonight, build the doorway. Let the last minutes before sleep be swept of argument, of screens, of the day's gale, a small windless room where the ember of the first chapter can take hold. Then strike gently, cup the flame of one loving thought, and let sleep close its hands around yours. What catches in shelter can face any weather tomorrow. Chapter 4. The Kindling Order. At the edge of the wood, Fern Larch sold kindling in graded bundles, and she could tell a cold house by its shopping. The impatient bought only great logs, laid them on a single spark, and wondered at their black, dead grates. Fern would stack the order on her counter like a small staircase. Paper, then twigs, then branches, then logs, she said. Fire climbs. It does not leap. Her graded bundles reveal the mistake that has kept so many hearts unlit. You have been waiting for the log, the great love, the grand reunion, the once-for-all healing, and refusing the paper and twigs, the small warmths within reach of your hand tonight. But hearts, like fires, climb. The smile returned to the shopkeeper catches the twig of a kind word to your sister, which catches the branch of an evening freely given to a friend, and only a heart already burning at that height can receive the log without smothering it. The great love is not withheld from you. It is waiting for a fire tall enough to lay it on. Matilda Quince was widowed young, and for 2 years she sat before the cold grate of her life, waiting for a warmth as large as the one she had lost, refusing all smaller flames as insults to it. The turn came the evening she let herself enjoy, fully and without guilt, 1 cup of chocolate by the window. Paper. The next week, a neighbor's child reading aloud at her table. Twigs. Within a season, Matilda's kitchen was the warm room of the lane, and when, in time, a gentle widower began lingering there, her heart received him easily, a log laid on a fire that had been climbing for months. Her rebuilt blaze teaches that no one skips the kindling order, not out of unworthiness but out of physics. Tonight, stop waiting for logs. Choose 1 twig for tomorrow, 1 small warmth you will let yourself fully feel, and place it in the grate of your plans. Then sleep, and notice in the morning how the heart leans toward the day when it knows a small fire has already been laid for it. Chapter 5. The Air Between the Logs. In a clearing above the village, Oswald Bramwell made bellows, and his workshop wall carried a lesson burned into an old board. Fire is 1 part fuel, 1 part spark, and 1 part air, and the air is the part everyone forgets. He had watched 100 well-meaning keepers kill their own fires with kindness, packing the logs so tight, feeding the flames so constantly, that no breath could move between them. A smothered fire and a starved fire die the same death, he would say. One from neglect, one from love. His creaking bellows reveal the tenderest correction this book will ever make. There is a way of loving that leaves no air. The checking, the hovering, the gripping, the need to be needed every hour, all of it packs the logs of 2 lives so tightly that the very flame you are protecting begins to gutter. Love does not fail from too much warmth. It fails from too little space, and the hands that hold tightest are so often the hands that love most and were simply never taught that a flame breathes. Rowena Sedge learned this with her grown son. She had wrapped his life in daily letters, in worry offered as devotion, in questions that arrived faster than his answers, and she felt him cooling and gripped harder as anyone would. An old neighbor, watching her rake a fire one evening, said only this: "Loosen the stack, Rowena." She began writing weekly instead of daily, asking 1 question instead of 9, leaving pauses he could enter on his own. Within a month, for the first time in years, a letter arrived that she had not prompted, long and warm and full of him, a flame reaching back through the space she had finally allowed it. Her loosened stack teaches that space inside love is not distance. It is draft, the breath that keeps the fire alive. Tonight, find 1 place where your hands have been packed too tight around someone, and in your mind, gently open the stack, 1 log's width of air, no more. Then give your own chest the same gift, unclench, let the breath move, and sleep like a well-laid fire, warm precisely because nothing in you is crushed. Chapter 6. The Green Wood. Up in the timber rows, Idris Coombs split and stacked wood for the whole valley, and he refused on principle to sell green wood to anyone. Fresh-cut logs look magnificent, heavy and clean, but lay them on a fire and they do not burn. They hiss, they smoke, they spit and sulk and fill the room with steam because the life in them has not yet finished becoming fuel. Wood is not ready when it is cut, Idris would say, stacking the new logs to wait. Wood is ready when it has rested. His seasoning stacks reveal a mercy you have been withholding from yourself and others. Some hearts you have tried to love were green, not bad, not cold, simply not yet done with a former season, and all your good flame brought out of them was hiss and smoke, and you blamed your fire. And some seasons, be honest, the green wood was you, pressed to burn brightly for someone while your sap still ran with old grief. Readiness is not a flaw of the unready. It is a stage of the wood, and the keeper's wisdom is not to force the log but to stack it kindly in the dry and let time do what only time does. Carrie's Fallowfield learned to stop striking matches against green wood. The man she cared for was 1 year out of a great loss, and every warmth she offered came back as steam. Instead of pressing harder or walking away, she chose the woodman's third path. She stacked the friendship in a dry, patient place, walks, small kindnesses, no demands, and let him season. Within a year, on an ordinary evening, he caught, suddenly and completely, the way rested wood does, and the fire they keep now burns clean, without one wisp of the old smoke. Her patient stack teaches that love has a calendar of its own, and the calendar is not a rejection. It is occurring. Tonight, forgive every fire that ever hissed at you, including your own, for they were not refusing you. They were unfinished. Then rest in your own seasoning, for the night is where hearts cure fastest, and sleep, knowing that somewhere in you, wood that once wept is quietly becoming flame. Chapter 7. The Draft Beneath the Door. In a cottage at the cold end of the lane, Gwendolyn Sweeting sewed the long, sand-filled door snakes that kept the village's winters out, and her trade had taught her a detective's eye. Families would burn twice the coal of their neighbors and still shiver, blaming the fire, blaming the coal, blaming the house. Gwendolyn never looked at the fire. She walked the room with a candle, watching the flame lean until it bent toward some sly gap beneath the door. Your fire is faithful, she would tell them. Your room is leaking. Her leaning candle reveals why some seasons of your heart stay cold no matter how much love is fed into them. Somewhere in the room, a draft is running, and the draft has a name. Fear, the quiet certainty of being left. The braced waiting for the turn, for the catch, for the day they see the real you and go. Such fears do not attack the fire directly. They pull the warmth out under the door, hour after hour, so that love is felt and lost in the same breath. And the heart concludes it was never loved enough, when it was only never sealed. Ernest Udall, the station master, kept the warmest stove on the line and the coldest waiting room, and could not say why until an old porter walked the walls with him and found the gap. In Ernest's case, the gap was a sentence he had carried since boyhood: everyone eventually boards a train away from me. He did not argue with the fear. He named it out loud to the empty room, and named it again each night until it lost its sly, invisible power. Within weeks, the strangest thing, the same stove, the same coal, and travelers lingering in his waiting room as if it were a parlor. The warmth had finally been allowed to stay. His sealed room teaches that most cold hearts are not underfed. They are underdefended warm fires in leaking rooms. Tonight, take the candle and walk your walls. Feel for the fear that has been thinning your warmth, and when the flame leans, name what it leans toward gently once, without judgment. Then lay the word down like a door snake against the gap, and sleep in a sealed room, and notice in the morning how much of last night's warmth is, for once, still yours. Chapter 8. The Chimney That Must Breathe. On the rooftops of the town, Hugo Crowther swept chimneys, and he knew a secret about smoking fires that the people below never guessed. When a room fills with smoke, the family always blames the fire, and the fire is almost never at fault. The flue is blocked. Old soot, a fallen nest, years of small neglect, and suddenly everything the fire produces, which should have risen freely into the sky, comes rolling back into the room, stinging every eye in the house. A fire must breathe out, Hugo would say, tapping the bricks, or it turns its own warmth to poison. His long brushes reveal what happens to love that is felt and never spoken. Affection is meant to rise out of the chest up through the voice, into the air between people. The word of thanks, the plain "I love you," the admiration finally said aloud. When the flue of expression is blocked by pride, by shyness, by the family habit of silence, the love does not disappear. It backs up. It rolls into the room as its own smoke, the strange irritability we feel around those we love most and tell least, the sting in the eyes at gatherings where everything is felt and nothing is said. Dilys Rainford grew up in such a house, a family warm in deed and mute in word, and she carried the blocked flue into her own life until her father's illness frightened her into a sweep's courage. One evening, sitting by his bed, she said the unsaid plainly, all of it, his patience, his sacrifices, her love. The words went up and out like 30 years of smoke finally finding sky. Within days, the whole house breathed differently, her father lighter, her own chest unstung, and the strange bickering that had haunted their visits gone, as if it had only ever been smoke looking for a way out. Her cleared flue teaches that unspoken love does not stay love. It becomes weather in the room. Tonight, choose one wisp of the unsaid, one thanks, one tenderness, one plain sentence ode to a living soul, and resolve to release it up the chimney tomorrow, spoken or written. Then sleep with a drawing flue and feel how sweetly a fire burns the moment it is allowed at last to breathe out. Chapter 9. The Ember Carried Between Houses. In the oldest days of the village, before matches were common, there lived a trade now almost forgotten. Petronella Kindred was the fire carrier, and when a family's hearth died in the night, they did not sit in the cold out of pride. They sent for Petronella, who walked the dark lanes with a horn lantern and a curfew pan, carrying a live coal from a neighbor's fire to relight their own. No one was ashamed, she would say. Every hearth in this village has died at least once. Every hearth in this village has been relit by another. Her glowing pan reveals the law your pride has been breaking. Hearts like hearths sometimes go out through grief, through winters too long, through no fault of the keeper, and the old world knew what the new world forgot, that borrowing fire is not failure. It is the design. Love was never meant to be a private, self-igniting miracle. It moves between houses, carried in visits and letters and asked for help, and the coldest room in any town is always the one whose keeper decided that needing a coal was beneath them. Godfrey Unwin, the farrier, was such a keeper. When his wife died, he shut his door on every casserole and every knock, resolved to relight his own life or sit honorably in the dark. 2 winters he sat. Then one evening, out of coal in every sense, he did the unthinkable and crossed the lane to the carpenter's bright window and simply said, "I cannot seem to get warm." He was given a chair by the fire, and then a standing chair, and then a place in a family's evenings. Within a season, his own forge glowed again, and his own door stood open, and he had become, to his own astonishment, a lender of coals himself. His crossed lane teaches that asking for warmth is not the opposite of strength. It is how fire has always traveled. Tonight, if your grate is low, choose the house. One person whose fire is steady and one small, honest ask you will carry to them tomorrow, a visit, a talk, an hour. Then sleep in peace, for the lanterns are already moving in the lanes and no heart in this world was ever meant to relight itself alone. Before we get into the next chapter, you can download a free ebook version of this audiobook completely free. It's the first link in the description and in the pinned comment below this video. Chapter 10. The Lamp in the Window. Above the steam of her teapots, Aurelia Blythe kept one lamp burning in the window of her room, first lit by her grandmother and never moved since. Travelers on the dark road could not see the fire inside, could not smell the bread or know the welcome. They could only see the lamp, and the lamp was enough. People do not walk toward warmth they cannot see, her grandmother had taught her. The lamp is the fire, telling the road about itself. Her steady window reveals why warm hearts so often sit alone. You may keep the finest fire in the county behind a dark window, a heart full of loyalty and tenderness that the road has no way of knowing, for heart's red lamps, not intentions. The unreturned smile withheld out of shyness, the eyes kept carefully down, the guarded politeness worn like shutters. None of it is coldness, but all of it reads as a dark house, and travelers pass dark houses by, no matter what burns inside them. The lamp is small work, a face opened by 1°, a greeting offered first, a window in 100 small ways left lit. Reginald Farthing, the spectacle maker, had a warm soul and a shop like a closed eye, blinds half drawn, his gaze on his lenses, his kindness invisible at 20 paces. When trade thinned, he changed one thing only. He moved his workbench into the window, looked up when the bell rang, and greeted the street by name as it passed. Within weeks, the shop filled, and not only with customers. The widow from the bookshop began lingering at his counter at closing time, drawn, she later admitted, by the simple sight of a man working in a lit window, looking as if company would be welcome. It would have been welcome for years. Only the lamp had been missing. His lit window teaches that the world is full of travelers looking for exactly your fire and passing it nightly for want of one small light. Tonight, choose your lamp. One signal you will set in the window tomorrow, the first hello, the unguarded face, the door of you left visibly ajar. Then sleep and let the deeper heart practice shining while you rest, and notice in the morning how differently the road looks at a house that has decided to be seen. Part 2. The Tending of the Flame. Chapter 11. The Smoke of Old Grievance. In the wash house at the end of the town, Theodosia Umber boiled soap and scrubbed the smoke stains from other people's parlors, and she could read a family's habits in their walls. Clean burning houses stayed bright for a generation, but houses that burned wet, spoiled fuel, old rubbish, damp and bitter wood, wore their smoke on every surface, gray films on the windows, shadows above the mantel until even the daylight came in dirty. The fire forgets in an hour, she would say, wringing her cloth. The walls remember for years. Her blackened rags reveal what old grievance does inside the house of the heart. A resentment is wet fuel. It never burns clean and it never burns out. Thrown on the fire again and again, the same old injury, the same replayed scene. It gives almost no warmth and endless smoke. And the smoke settles on how you hear new voices, on how you read innocent faces, a gray film over windows that once let the world in bright. The person who wronged you feels nothing of this fire. The walls that darken are all yours. Baldwin Gorse, the peat cutter, had burned one wet log for 11 years, a brother's betrayal over their father's field, rehearsed nightly until his whole inner house was gray with it. The end came not through a reunion but through a housekeeping decision. He simply stopped putting the log on. Each night the memory reached for the fire, and each night he set it aside, unburned like fuel he no longer stocked. Within months, to his bewilderment, the world brightened, food tasted, mornings arrived clean, and when at last his brother stood at his gate, Baldwin found the room of himself clear enough to let him in. His unburned log teaches that you are not asked to bless what happened. You are only asked to stop heating your house with it. Tonight, notice the wet log your hand reaches for at bedtime, the old scene, the old name, and gently set it aside, unburned just for tonight. Then sleep in a clean drawing room and notice in the morning how much lighter the windows are when the night was not spent in smoke. Chapter 12. The Cold Room. Mirabelle Loveday aired the shut rooms of the great houses, and she knew the one mistake every eager housekeeper made. Finding a room long closed, cold, sheeted, heavy with absence, they would light a roaring fire in its grate to warm it in an hour. And the room would weep. Moisture started from every wall, plaster cracked, the cold fought back. Shut rooms are not warmed by force, Mirabelle taught the young maids. You open the door to the warm house, a little more each day, and let the warmth walk in at its own pace. Her open doors reveal the gentlest law in this book, the law of the grieving chamber. Somewhere in the house of your heart there may be such a room, closed after a loss, sheeted and silent, and the world has told you to march in with a bonfire, to move on, to fill the space, to be warm there by force. But grief is a cold room, and cold rooms weep when rushed. The tending is slower and kinder, the door propped open an inch, the warmth of your living rooms allowed to drift in. An hour spent there, sitting with what the room holds, then supper by your own fire, then an hour again tomorrow. Clarence Hollybrook lost his wife in the spring, and by autumn the well-meaning had nearly wrecked him with their bonfires, the trips, the introductions, the brisk advice. An old widower on his lane gave him Mirabelle's method instead. 1 hour a day in the cold room, her chair, her garden, her letters, fully present, and the rest of the day lived by the warm fires that remained. His daughter, his roses, his work. Within months, without one forced flame, the room changed. It held sunlight now. He could enter it and smile there. The cold had not been driven out. It had been loved out at the pace cold rooms ask. His sunlit room teaches that grief is not a fire problem. It is a door problem, and doors open by inches. Tonight, if you keep such a room, do not storm it. Simply, in your mind, unlatch its door and let 1 inch of your warmth drift toward what it holds. Then return to your own hearth and sleep, for the warmth will keep walking inward all night, gentle as morning entering a house. Chapter 13. The Poker and the Breath. In her narrow shop of lamps and tapers, Isolde Wickham trimmed wicks and revived dying flames for half the town, and she kept 2 tools on her counter to teach with. A black iron poker and her own breath. When a fire sinks low, she would say, the frightened reach for the poker, and the poker scatters what little is left. The wise kneel close and breathe, long and soft, and the embers remember themselves. Her kneeling patience reveals the difference between 2 ways of reviving anything that has gone low, a romance grown quiet, a friendship cooled, your own dimmed affection for your life. The poker is force. The demand that things feel like they used to, the interrogation of where the spark went, the dramatic stirring that scatters embers across the grate and calls the scattering honesty. The breath is different. The breath is small, warm, steady attention, aimed low, expecting nothing by nightfall. A hand held again. A kindness repeated daily without scorekeeping. The old joke retold gently. Embers do not answer to iron. They answer to air that believes in them. Humphrey Deering, the kettle mender, had a marriage gone quiet as a banked grate, and his pokering, the accusations, the where did we go, the sudden demanding gestures had scattered more than it stirred. He traded the poker for the breath. Every evening, one soft attention, tea carried up, a walk remembered, her hand taken during the reading hour, asked to prove nothing. For weeks the embers only glowed. Then one ordinary Tuesday his wife laughed at something small, leaned into his shoulder, and the room was warm again, not with new fire, with their own breath back. His set-down poker teaches that low is not out, and that nothing tender was ever stirred back to life. It was breathed. Tonight, choose one low fire in your keeping and plan its first breath, one soft, expectation-free warmth for tomorrow. Then breathe your own embers the same way, slow and kind in the dark, and sleep, and notice in the morning the faint new glow where yesterday you would have sworn there was only ash. Chapter 14. The Borrowed Opinion of Cold People. Under her tower of felt and ribbon, Drusilla Vetch made hats, and she had long noticed who complained most bitterly about drafts in her shop. Never the warm-blooded. Always the visitors who had walked in cold, sat far from her stove by their own choosing, and then declared the whole establishment freezing. Cold judges every room by its own hands, she would murmur, pinning a brim, and warm rooms cannot argue with cold hands. Her pinned certainty reveals whose voices have been advising your heart. The world is full of people sitting far from their own fires, hearts unbanked for years, and from that seat they issue weather reports on everyone else's warmth. Your tenderness is naive, they say. Your devotion is too much, your hopes will burn you, love like yours is asking for winter. Understand what you are hearing, not wisdom temperature. A cold hand testifying accurately about itself. The keeper's discipline is not to hate the cold sitters, who are only far from their own grates, but to stop tending your fire by their forecasts. Montague Pippin, the muffin man, was mocked for years by the colder traders of the square. A grown man ringing a bell over a warm griddle, told daily that his little trade was foolish and his cheerfulness more foolish still. He kept the griddle hot anyway, kept the greeting warm anyway, tended his corner by his own thermometer. Within a few seasons, his corner was the beloved heart of that square. The place children were brought and courtships warmed, and the cold traders still muttered, from their distant seats, about drafts no customer of Montague's had ever once felt. His ringing bell teaches that the cold are not lying about what they feel. They are only wrong about where the cold is. Tonight, gently return one borrowed forecast, one cold opinion about your way of loving that you have been treating as weather. Then read your warmth by your own hands, which know the truth of your fire better than any far chair ever will, and sleep in a room declared warm by its keeper. Chapter 15. The Ash That Feeds the Garden. Behind her still house of copper and glass, Zillah Rowan grew the roses she distilled, and gardeners came from 3 counties to ask what fed such blooms. She would lift the lid of an old iron pail by the door. "Ash," she said, "every spent fire in this house ends on these beds. What is finished with warming is not finished with giving." Her gray pail reveals what to do with the loves that ended. The world offers you 2 poor choices: to carry the cold ashes in your pockets forever, grieving and sifting them daily, or to curse them and scatter them in anger, salting your own ground. The gardener's third way is older and kinder. Ash, thanked and spread, feeds what grows next. The patience you learned in the love that failed, the tenderness it opened, the self-knowledge it cost, all of it is mineral now, meant for the roots of what is coming. Nothing loved is ever wasted. It only changes duty from flame to food. Edgar Silverwood carried the ashes of his first marriage in his pockets for 6 years, weighing every new warmth against their gray heaviness, until an old gardener's word turned him. One autumn evening he sat down and, in a letter never sent, thanked the ended love honestly, line by line, for each thing it had grown in him, and then, in his own ceremony, imagined spreading its ash on the beds of his future. Within a season, a new gentleness had rooted in him that everyone near him felt, and when love came again, it came up through soil made rich, not poisoned by everything before. His spread ashes teach that gratitude is the gardener's tool for endings, and that the past feeds best when it is finally allowed to stop burning. Tonight, Take one-ended warmth and thank it for a single true gift it left in you. One line, whispered. Then let its ash leave your pockets for the garden beds of your tomorrows, and sleep, and notice in the morning how much lighter a keeper walks who carries fire, and only fire. Chapter 16. The One Warm Room. Henrietta Yule kept the almshouse through the leanest winters the county could send, and she kept it by breaking a rule the grand houses lived by. She did not try to heat the whole building. When coal was short, she chose one room, the long kitchen, and made it truly, deeply warm and moved the whole life of the house into it. The mending, the reading, the old men's chess, the children's lessons. We cannot warm every room, she would say, banking the one great fire. But no one under this roof will live in the cold. Her gathered kitchen reveals the winter economy of the heart, the wisdom for your hardest seasons. There are stretches of life, illness, overwork, loss, thin times when you cannot keep every relationship glowing, every duty warm, every corner of your world tended, and the attempt to heat it all leaves the whole house lukewarm and the keeper spent. The old wisdom does not ask that of you. It asks you to choose the one warm room, one relationship kept truly alive, 1 hour of the day made fully golden. One small ritual defended like a flame in wind, and the rest of the house allowed, without guilt, to wait for spring. Ivor Nethercott, a sawyer out of work through a long gray winter, learned Henrietta's economy just in time. Unable to be everything, he chose one room, the supper hour. Whatever the day had been, from 6 to 7 the table was lit, the food was simple and hot, and he was wholly there, unworried on purpose, warm on purpose. Within weeks, his children stopped tiptoeing around the hard times, because the heart of the house was demonstrably alive, and when spring and work returned, the family that walked out of that winter was closer than the one that had walked in. His defended hour teaches that love in hard seasons is not measured by coverage. It is measured by the aliveness of the one room you refuse to let go cold. Tonight, if your season is thin, resign from heating the whole house, and name your one warm room, the person, the hour, the ritual that will not go out. Then rest, unashamed of the waiting rooms, for houses have survived every winter in history this way, one faithful fire at a time. Chapter 17. The Mirror Above the Mantel. In a studio smelling of linseed and lavender, Sydney Verrill painted miniature portraits, and sitters always left her room strangely lightened. Her secret was not flattery. It was placement. Sydney painted people the way they looked when speaking of what they loved, and she had noticed a cruelty in ordinary mirrors, the way people met their own eyes. They approached the glass like a magistrate, she said, mixing her colors. They would never look at anyone else that way. Her small, warm portraits reveal what happens nightly above the mantle of your heart. There is a mirror there and a voice that speaks while you look, and for years it may have offered the magistrate's report. Too much, too little, too late, unlovable in the particular ways you know best. Understand what that voice is to your fire. A mirror above a mantle doubles whatever stands before it, the light or the gloom, and a heart that hears contempt at its own hearth every night is trying to stay warm in front of a glass that doubles the cold. Leopold Mabot had such a mirror, and his fireside sentence, spoken silently for 30 years, was no wonder. Look at you. On the counsel of a friend, he changed one thing only, the sentence. Each night before sleep, looking inward at himself, he said instead what Sydney would have painted. Here is a man who kept going and who is learning to be kind. It felt foolish for a week and true by the third. Within months, he stood differently, spoke to himself in daylight as he did at night, and the widow at the lending library, who had passed him for years, began to linger, drawn to a warmth that had finally stopped being halved at its own mantle. His new sentence teaches that the heart believes its nightly mirror, so the keeper must furnish it honestly and kindly, for those are not opposites. Tonight, stand before the mantel glass and change the sentence. One true, warm line about the person keeping this fire, spoken as you would speak it of a friend. Then sleep beneath a mirror that doubles light, and notice in the morning how much further your warmth travels when it is no longer arguing with its own reflection. Chapter 18. The Two Logs. In her clearing of smoke and turf-covered mounds, Parthenia Oakhurst burned charcoal, and she liked to show visitors the oldest trick of the fireside. She would set a single log burning alone, and they would watch it dim and die, no matter how good the wood. Then two logs laid near each other, a hand's width apart, and the flame stood up and lived. One log cannot keep its own heat, she explained. Each must warm the face of the other. Fire, at its heart, is a conversation. Her paired logs reveal why the self-sufficient heart, for all its strength, so often goes quietly out. You were taught to burn alone, to need no one, to call the single logs dimming independence. But warmth is built like the fire itself, two faces reflecting heat into one another, each keeping the other above the dying point, and neither, notice the spacing, pressed so close as to smother. A hand's width apart. Near enough to feed each other, free enough to breathe. That measure, the old burners said, is the whole architecture of companionship. Roderick Everleigh, a bookseller of settled solitary habits, was a fine log dimming alone, evenings of good pages and slowly cooling rooms. It was the chess table at the coffee house that saved his fire, one standing appointment, one opposite face, an old clockmaker's widow with a ruthless endgame and a warm laugh. Neither crowded the other. Neither let the other go out. Within a season, Roderick noticed that everything in his life burned better, the shop friendlier, the books deeper, the mornings lit, all from one companionship laid at the correct distance. His standing appointment teaches that no heart is asked to blaze alone, and that even one true opposite face can keep a whole life above the dying point. Tonight, think of your logs. Where you burn alone, plan the one pairing, the standing hour, the returned invitation. Where you burn crowded, restore the hand's width. Then sleep, warmed by every face that has ever been laid across from yours, and let the night hold you at exactly the distance where fires live. Chapter 19. The Fuel You Choose at Dusk. Adeline Harkness sold ballads from a tray at the evening market, and she kept a rule her customers found strange. After the church bells rang 6, she would sell no cruel songs, no murder sheets, no mocking verses, only the tender and the bright. What is sung at dusk is hummed all night, she explained, tapping her tray. I will not send a soul to bed with a knife in its music. Her curated tray reveals a truth about the hour you may be spending most carelessly. The last fuel of the day burns the longest. Whatever the heart takes in at dusk, the quarrelsome page, the bitter conversation replayed, the parade of other people's glittering lives, the cruel song in whatever form it now arrives, is laid whole upon the night fire, and the night, faithful servant that it is, burns exactly what it is given, all the way to morning. You have wondered why some dawns arrive already sour. Look at what was sold to you and by you at 6. Cuthbert Locker took the ballad seller's rule into his own evenings. For years his last hour had been spent with the angriest papers and the day's worst retellings, wet, cruel fuel stacked nightly, and his sleep and his marriage both smelled of the smoke. He changed only the dusk. The last hour became letters from old friends, a chapter of something beautiful, 10 minutes of the garden in the failing light. Within days, his dreams changed weather. Within weeks, his wife remarked that the man who came down to breakfast seemed to have traveled home from somewhere kinder. And he had, for the night burns what it is given, and he had finally begun giving it well. His changed hour teaches that no one wakes free of their dusk. The evening is not the end of the day. It is the stalking of the night. Tonight and from now on, audit the last hour like a keeper choosing fuel, for that is exactly what it is. Then lay the seasoned wood, the beautiful, the tender, the true, and sleep, and notice in the morning the difference in the ash. Chapter 20. The banked heart survives the storm. On the cliff above the fishing town, Morwenna Tressider kept the fire watch, and she had seen what gales do to fires left proud and blazing. The wind finds them, scatters them, takes their own brightness as a map to destroy them by. But the fires that had been banked, humbled under their blanket of ash before the storm broke, those the wind passed over, and in the gray morning after, one breath brought them roaring back. The storm kills what stands tall, she would say, watching the weather come. It cannot find what sleeps warm and low. Her storm lore reveals how love survives its hardest weather. There are gales no keeper can prevent, the long separation, the illness, the season when a beloved goes cold and distant in their own private winter. And in such weather the untaught heart makes the fatal choice, blazing higher, demanding, pursuing, standing tall into the wind until the wind takes everything. The old keepers knew the other way. Bank it. Rake the love together, cover it with patience, keep it small, warm, and utterly alive beneath the storm, faithful without flaring, until the weather, as all weather does, passes. Archibald Dunmore, a coachman, was parted from his beloved for a full winter by her family's disapproval and 100 frozen miles. Every instinct told him to blaze, grand gestures into the gale, demands, despair. Instead he banked. One calm letter a month, warm and unpleading. Her name kept gently in his nightly ember. His own life tended, so the fire had a keeper worth returning to. When spring opened the roads, she came back to find not the scattered ashes of a man who had burned himself out at the weather, but a low, live, waiting warmth, and one breath, one meeting on the coach road, brought it entire into flame. His banked winter teaches that hope held low is not hope diminished. It is hope made storm-proof. Tonight, if a gale is running through some love of yours, stop standing tall into it. Rake what is true together, cover it with patience, and keep it warm and small and yours. Then sleep beneath the weather, safe in the oldest promise of the hearth, that morning comes, that storms end, and that banked fires wake. Part 3. The Shared Fire. Chapter 21. The Matchmaker's Secret. Euphemia Paramore had matched half the marriages in the valley, and she had never once introduced anybody to anybody. The mothers who came begging for arrangements always left puzzled, for Euphemia's whole art was invisible. She simply made rooms warm. Her parlor evenings had good fires, easy chairs angled kindly, songs anyone could join, and unhurried time, and in rooms like that, hearts found each other the way cold hands find a stove. You cannot push two people together, she would say, pouring the tea. You can only build the warmth they will both walk toward. Her angled chairs reveal the secret of attraction that all the striving world has missed. Love is not hunted down. It is drawn in, and what draws it is not performance, not the perfected profile of a self, but temperature. A person at ease in their own warmth is a lit parlor on a cold road, and travelers feel it through the walls. The hunters exhaust themselves knocking on doors. The keepers simply live warmly and audibly, and the road, which is always full of cold hands, bends toward them on its own. Gareth Honeybone, a shy tinsmith, had hunted for years and caught nothing but his own reflection in shop windows. On Euphemia's quiet advice, he stopped hunting and started warming, took up his corner at her parlor evenings, mended toys for the children there, laughed when he felt like laughing, and let himself be the modest, genuine heat he actually was. Within a season, the glover's daughter, who had somehow never noticed him in years of his careful approaches, sat down beside him one evening as though it were the most natural act in the world, because by then it was. Cold hands, warm stove, the oldest arithmetic there is. His unhunted love teaches that you were never failing to find love. You were only knocking when you might have been glowing. Tonight, retire the hunter. Let the last thought before sleep be not where is my love, but how warm is my parlor, and tend 1 degree of it in your mind. Then sleep as a lit room sleeps, quietly certain of travelers, for the road is long, the night is cold, and yours may be the window they have been walking toward for years. Chapter 22. The Candle That Loses Nothing. In her workshop of rush and tallow, Keturah Orpington made the humble rushlights of the poor, and she loved to show children the miracle that never stopped being one. She would light a single rush, then touch a second to it, then a 10th, then a 40th, until the whole workshop glowed, and then hold up the first light, entirely undiminished. Count again, she would tell them, laughing. 40 flames, and the first has lost nothing. Fire is the one wealth that does not divide when it is shared. Her undivided flame reveals the false arithmetic that has been starving hearts for generations. Somewhere you learned that love is coin, that warmth given here is warmth unavailable there, that another's happiness draws down the common account, and from that sum came jealousy, rationing, the fear of giving too much away. But love keeps fire's books, not money's. The affection you give your friend does not dock your beloved's share. The joy you feel at another's good fortune does not spend yours. Every flame lit from you leaves you whole and leaves the room brighter, and the brighter room warms you back. Herbert Quickfall, the jam maker, had rationed himself for years, guarding his recipes, measuring his praise, hoarding his sweetness like a man in famine. The lean autumn he began giving jars away, to the school, to the almshouse, to rivals even. His neighbors thought grief had turned his head. Within one season, his little kitchen could not keep pace with the goodwill flowing back, orders, friendships, fruit from a dozen gardens arriving unasked at his door. He had lit 40 candles and stood, undiminished, in the light of all of them. His given jars teach that generosity is not spending. It is ignition, and the fire always returns by the warmth of the room it made. Tonight, find one flame you have been rationing, one praise unspoken, one joy ungiven, one candle you feared to light from yours, and resolve to light it tomorrow. Then sleep in fire's arithmetic, where giving multiplies and nothing true is ever divided, and notice in the morning how rich a heart feels that has stopped counting. Chapter 23. The Warming of Hands Before Speaking. Damaris Alderney had delivered 3 generations of the valley's children, and the mothers all remembered the same small thing about her. Before Damaris touched anyone, she warmed her hands at the fire in warm water between her own palms, always, even in summer, even in haste. Cold hands make a body flinch, she explained to the young women she trained, and a body that has flinched stops listening. Warm the hands first, then everything you do after is received. Her warmed palms reveal the missing first step in nearly every failed comforting you have ever attempted or endured. When a person you love is in trouble, the untaught instinct reaches straight for the tools, the advice, the solution, the brisk correction, cold instruments laid on tender skin, and the flinch that follows gets mistaken for ingratitude. The old midwife's order is the true one. Warmth before hands, hands before words, words last of all and sometimes never. Presence is the warming, the sitting down, the unhurried breath beside them. The plain I am here, asked to fix nothing. Only a warmed heart can be touched without flinching, and only an unflinching heart can actually hear. Cecil Thornberry, the public letter writer, learned this at his little table where the troubled came to have hard letters written. In his early years he wrote at once, efficient and useless, and the letters came out cold and the people left colder. Then he changed his method. First tea, Then their story heard whole, his pen untouched. Only then words. Within months his table had a waiting line, and the letters that left it began mending estrangements across 3 counties, because they were written on warmed hearts in warmed ink, by a man who had learned that comfort has an order of operations. His waiting pen teaches that love's first language is temperature, and that no wisdom survives arrival on cold hands. Tonight, think of the person you most want to help and set down, for now, every tool you were planning to bring them. Then practice the warming, breathe, soften, sit with them in your mind, ask to fix nothing, and sleep, and carry those warmed hands into tomorrow's first conversation. Chapter 24. The Stove in the Stranger's House. On the coldest corner of the town, Anwen Merton roasted chestnuts, and she had a habit the hurrying crowds never noticed. To the gray, closed faces, the ones everyone else avoided, she spoke first. A good evening, a hot half-dozen pressed into a hesitant hand, a small warmth offered with no account kept. Every stranger keeps a stove you cannot see, she told her niece. Some have not been lit in years. You will not always see the smoke rise. Light them anyway. Her unwatched kindness reveals the hidden architecture of every crowd you pass. Behind each closed face stands a house you will never enter, and in it a stove, and some of those stoves have stood cold through winters you cannot imagine, waiting not for a bonfire but for one coal, one greeting, one unearned courtesy, laid by a passing hand. You have such coals in your pocket every hour, costing nothing, and the strange law of them is this. A coal given to a stranger's stove warms 2 houses, theirs where it lands and yours where it left. Peregrine Ivans, keeper of the town park, tested the law on the grayest man of his rounds, a silent figure on the same bench through every weather, whom the town had long agreed to look past. Peregrine simply greeted him daily, by hat tip first, then by name once he learned it, one coal at a time for a whole autumn. The morning the old man finally spoke, a widower it turned out, 3 years into an unlit house, he said a sentence Peregrine kept for the rest of his life. I had one stove left with any fire in it, and it was the one you kept lighting. His daily hat tip teaches that no courtesy is small, for you cannot see the stove it lands in, or how long it has stood cold. Tonight, choose tomorrow's stranger, the gray face on your own daily round, and pocket the coal you will give them, a greeting, a kindness, a first word. Then sleep warmly, keeper of more houses than you knew, and notice in the days to come the faint smoke rising from chimneys you had been told were dead. Chapter 25. The Hearth Big Enough for 2 Kettles. At the shared bay coven of the market square, Alwyn Harthope made her pies beside her fiercest rival, and the town waited years for the 2 women to burn each other down. Instead, they became the square's great lesson. 1 fire, 2 kettles, and a schedule worked out in chalk on the oven's brick, her crusts in the morning heat, the other's loaves in the slow afternoon, each guarding the other's bake as her own. The fire is big enough, Alwyn would say, dusting flour from her apron. It was only ever the kettles that quarreled. Her chalked schedule reveals the daily craft of every shared life. 2 people at one hearth, a marriage, a family, a friendship of long standing, are 2 kettles on 1 fire, and the untaught pair fight the wrong war, each convinced the other's warmth is theft, each shouldering for the center of the grate until the jostling spills both. The kept pair learn the chalk and the brick. Your heat in the morning, mine in the evening, your dream funded this year, mine the next, both kettles named out loud, neither shrunk to fit, and the fire, which was always big enough, warms the 2 of them into something no single kettle ever becomes. Imrise Fairbank, the traveling tinker, mended more marriages than pots, and his method never varied. Called to a house loud with the 2-kettle war, he would sit the pair down and have each say plainly what their kettle held, the deferred hope, the crowded dream, The warmth they feared there was no room for. Then the chalk. One couple he served, at war for a decade over her shop in his fields, drew up their schedule of heat at his little table, and within weeks the neighbors reported an eerie sound from that house. Laughter at the old battlegrounds. His mended houses teach that most fights beside a fire are not about love at all. They are about room, and room can be chalked. Tonight, name your kettle honestly what it holds, what heat it has been waiting for, and name just as honestly the kettle beside yours. Then in your drowsing mind, draw the chalk lines kindly, room for both, and sleep. For the fire was always big enough, and morning is a fine time to say so out loud. Chapter 26. The Rekindling. In the assembly rooms above the square, Christabel Farrow taught dancing, and her strangest, dearest pupils were the long married. They came sheepishly, sent by anniversaries, certain their dancing days were ash. Christabel never taught them anything new. She asked one question, "What did you dance at your wedding?" and played it and stood back. The stumbling lasted a minute, sometimes two. Then the bodies remembered what the minds had filed away, and the room filled with something the couple had carried, banked, and untouched for 30 years. "I do not teach old couples to dance," she liked to say. "I rake back the ash." Her wedding waltzes reveal the truth about long love grown lukewarm, and it is gentler news than the world tells you. The world says the fire dies, that years are water, that lukewarm is the honest end of every blaze. The keepers know otherwise. Years are not water. Years are ash, the natural cover of any long-burning fire, settling gray and thick over embers that are almost always, when anyone troubles to look, still alive underneath. The lukewarm marriage is rarely an out fire. It is an unraked one, and raking is not grand. It is the old song played, the first cafe revisited, the courting walk rewalked, the small original rituals restored on purpose. Godwin Trundle, the butter churner, had 30 good, gray years behind him and a kitchen gone quiet as a Sunday. On Christabel's advice, he asked his wife for one waltz a week, in the kitchen, to the tune from the harvest dance where he had first taken her hand. She laughed at him and consented and stumbled and remembered. Within a month, the waltz had pulled other embers up with it, the teasing, the hand held at the market, the talking past bedtime, and the quiet kitchen had become, the neighbors swore, the warmest room on the lane again. His weekly waltz teaches that old love does not need replacing. It needs raking, and the rake is made of everything you did first. Tonight, lift the ash gently in your memory and find one original ember, the first song, the first walk, the first small ritual of any love you keep. Then plan its restoration, one waltz this week, and sleep smiling, for what you are certain has died is very often only covered and waiting for the keeper's hand. Chapter 27. The Scoured Pan. In her shop of toffee and marzipan, Tirzah Plumtree taught apprentice confectioners a rule that had nothing sweet about it. When a batch of sugar burns, the pan must be scoured to bright metal before the next batch begins, however long the scrubbing takes. The lazy wipe the pan and hurry on, and their next batch and their next, and every batch after, carries the ghost of the old burn. "Sugar forgives nothing left in the pan," she would say, scrubbing to the shine. Every sweetness after tastes of the last thing you refuse to clean. Her bright pans reveal what unforgiveness does to every love that follows it. The old betrayal left unscoured does not stay in its own year. It seasons the years after, a bitterness at the bottom of each new tenderness, an acrid readiness in every new trust, until the heart concludes that love itself has changed flavor when only the pan has. Forgiveness, the keepers knew, was never a gift smuggled to the one who burned you. It is scouring. It is done at your own sink for your own next batch, and the one who caused the burn need never even know the pan came clean. Osmond Gillow, a fiddler, had carried the burn of a partner's betrayal through 11 years and 3 bands, and every new ensemble tasted faintly of it, his trust acrid, his playing guarded. The scouring took him one long winter, the honest naming of the wrong, the grief let out of it, and at last the deliberate setting down, not because the man deserved it, but because Osmond's music did. The spring he came back to the dance floors, listeners heard the difference before they could name it. The bitterness was out of the pan. Within a season he was playing weddings again, sweet to the bottom of every tune. His scoured strings teach that forgiveness is not approval of the burn. It is refusal to let one bad batch flavor a lifetime of sweetness. Tonight, look honestly into your pan, and if an old burn still blackens the bottom, begin the scouring with one sentence: I am cleaning this for my own next sweetness. Then sleep, letting the night work at the residue as only nights can, and taste in the mornings to come how love was always meant to arrive, bright and entirely itself. Chapter 28. The Children at the Fender. In her workshop of sweet-smelling shavings, Lettice Younghusband made cradles, and parents came to her with anxious questions about raising warm-hearted children, as though warmth were a lesson with pages. Lettice would run her plane along a rocker and answer with a question of her own manners. Where does the child sit in the evening? For she had noticed, through 40 years of cradles, that children learn love the way they learn language, not from instruction but from immersion at the fender in the nightly weather of the house. Her rocking cradles reveal the humbling truth of every family hearth. The children are not listening to the lectures. They are reading the fire, how the keeper speaks to the other keeper when tired, whether apology exists in the house and what it sounds like, whether the door opens for the difficult neighbor. What is done at the fender is the curriculum, and what is merely said there is the noise. And a child warmed nightly by patience, laughter, and repair will carry that climate out into the world as their definition of normal, which is the only inheritance that never pays tax. Randolph Ashcombe, a goat-herd and a grandfather of few words, despaired of reaching his sullen grandson until he stopped trying to reach him at all. He simply made room at the fender, the boy's stool set nightly by his own, the fire tended, the dog between them, the silence companionable and unforced, and let the climate do the teaching. Within weeks the boy's shoulders came down. Within a season the secrets came out, unasked, into the warm quiet, the way children have always spoken at fires and never at lecterns. Nothing had been taught. Everything had been transmitted. His set stool teaches that with the young, love is climate before it is conversation, and the fender out teaches the lectern every night of the year. Tonight, consider what your fireside broadcasts to its youngest witnesses, not your words, your weather. Then choose 1 degree of the climate to warm tomorrow, 1 repair made visibly, 1 patience kept audibly, and sleep, for somewhere a small heart is calibrating itself to yours. Chapter 29. The Dovecote. Sarah Nightingale kept the manor dovecote, and visitors never stopped marveling at the same sight. Every morning the doves poured out into the open sky, free as weather, and every evening, unforced, unfetched, they poured home again. A merchant once asked her why she did not net the flight holes and be sure of them. Sarin looked at him the way keepers look at cage mines. Netted birds are not kept, she said. They are held. Mine return because the coat is warm and the door is open, and there is nothing in that sky that outbids a home like this one. Her open flight holes reveal the architecture of trust that anxious love keeps getting backwards. The frightened heart reasons like the merchant, secure what you love, watch it, question it, narrow its sky, and discovers too late that a held heart and a kept heart are different creatures, and that bars have never once produced devotion, only the appearance of it, resentfully worn. The keeper's way stakes everything on the opposite wager. Make the coat so warm, the welcome so reliable, the door so unmistakably open, that returning becomes the sweetest flight in the whole sky. Freedom is not the risk to love. Freedom is the proof of it, renewed every dusk. Corin Culver made birdcages for a living and had, without noticing, furnished his marriage from his own stock. The questioned outings, the audited friendships. The sky narrowed year by year in the name of care, and his wife's brightness dimming exactly as caged things dim. The change began in his shop, of all places, the day he started leaving his display cages open, birds choosing his warm room over the rafters. He carried the lesson home and unlatched everything, her evenings hers, her friendships unaudited, his welcome made warmer than his watch had ever been. Within a season, she was returning to him at dusk the way the doves returned to Sarin, entirely, and by choice, which he discovered was the only way he had ever actually wanted her. His opened latches teach that love is a dovecote, not a cage, and that everything worth keeping is kept by warmth and an open door. Tonight, find one latch your fear has fastened on someone, and in your drowsing mind lift it. Then sleep with your doors open and your coat warm, and notice in the evenings of your life what freely returns. Chapter 30. The Feast of the Lit House. Araminta Sweetapple kept the harvest suppers for the whole valley, and her long table had mended more hearts than the doctor and the parson combined. Her method was older than either profession. Light every lamp, set more places than are promised, cook simply and plentifully, and let the warmth do what warmth does when people sit down inside it together. No one has ever argued at my table with their mouth full of plum cake, she liked to say, and no one has ever left it as lonely as they came. Her long table reveals the feast law of the heart, the one the isolated centuries have forgotten. Love grows poorly in private storage and magnificently at tables. The lit house, the shared meal, the gathered evening, these are not entertainments bolted onto life. They are the old technology of belonging, the way warmth is braided between houses until a lane becomes a people. And the law has a keeper's clause the shy have never been told. The lit house blesses its lighter first. Whoever sets the table is warmed before a single guest arrives, by the act itself, the heart rehearsing welcome all afternoon. Denzil Marable, a glassblower of profound shyness, lived his evenings in a clean, dark, silent house, and believed himself a man to whom gathering did not happen. On Araminta's teasing challenge, he lit the house once, one supper, 1 month, 4 guests and a nervous stew, and survived it and lit it again. Within a year, his monthly table had become the quiet heart of the lane, the place hard weeks were unloaded and courtships warmed. And at that table, in the ordinary miracle such tables produce, a bookbinder's widow began staying to help with the dishes, and then staying. His monthly lamps teach that belonging is not found. It is hosted, and the door you open gathers the life you were waiting for. Tonight, plan one lighting of your house, however small, 2 chairs and toast is a feast if the lamps are on. Then sleep in a house that has decided to gather, and notice how the heart, knowing a table is coming, begins setting itself. Part 4. The Morning Warmth. Chapter 31. The First Warmth of Waking. Blodwen Trelawney made warming pans, the long-handled copper vessels that carried embers from the evening fire up into the beds of the house, and she understood better than anyone what her trade really sold. Not heat, timing. The pan meant that the first thing a body felt on lying down, and the first thing it remembered on waking, was warmth already there, warmth that had arrived ahead of it. The bed teaches the body what to expect of the world, she would say, polishing the copper. Warm it and the body learns welcome. Her copper pans reveal the second holy hour of the keeper's day, the one this book has been saving. You have learned the banking of the night. Now learn its twin, the first warmth of waking. Those opening minutes before the feet find the floor, before the day's cold correspondence begins, are when the night's banked fire is either received or trampled. The untaught hand reaches straight for the world's noise and scatters the morning grate before feeling it. The keeper's hand goes first to the chest, finds what the night kept warm, and carries one coal of it, deliberately in the pocket of the heart, into the day. Erasmus Cobb, the oil seller, began his rounds each dawn cold and braced until he adopted the warming pan minute. Before rising, one hand on his chest, one memory of being loved found and felt, one coal pocketed with the words, "This comes with me." The rounds themselves did not change. The man walking them did. Within weeks, the town noticed that the oil seller greeted everyone by name and meant it, and doors that had merely traded with him began welcoming him, for people can tell, at one glance in the morning, who has arrived carrying fire. His pocketed coal teaches that mornings are not neutral. They are the delivery of the night, and the keeper signs for it. Tonight bank as you have learned, and tomorrow, before rising, keep the appointment, the hand, the coal, the words, "This comes with me." Then watch the day meet a person who arrived already warm, and notice how much of the world turns out to have simply been waiting for that. Chapter 32. The heart that warms rooms it never enters. Philomena umberly fitted stoves in the crowded terraces, and she loved to show new families the hidden kindness in their walls. The chimney breast that carried her stove's smoke ran up through the neighbor's bedroom wall, and warmed it, quietly, all winter, without a single visit, without the neighbor ever quite knowing why their room was gentle in January. "Every fire warms rooms its keeper never enters," she would say, tapping the shared brick. "That is not a flaw in the house. That is the house." Her warm brick reveals the furthest reach of everything you have practiced in these pages. You have imagined, perhaps, that your inner tending is a private economy, that the banked ember and the scoured pan and the kind mantle sentence bless only you and those at your own fender. But hearts share walls. The patience you keep at home steadies a shop girl you speak to for 1 minute. The peace you carry into a crowded room lowers shoulders you will never touch. Your kept fire radiates through the party walls of every life adjacent to yours, warming bedrooms you will never see, and no keeper ever traces where the last of their warmth ends up, because it does not end. Gervase Dunwoody, an ink maker, considered himself a man of no influence, one quiet workman in a loud workshop. What he had, without knowing it, was a steady flame, unhurried mornings, a level voice, an unpanicked way with spilled things, and the workshop unknowingly warmed itself at him. The year he was away with a broken leg, the place grew snappish and cold, and no one could say why until he returned and the room settled. The foreman finally named it at the harvest supper. "We do not run on the clock in here," he said, raising a glass to the astonished Gervase. "We run on you." His unnoticed warmth teaches that no kept heart is a private matter. You are load-bearing warmth in more lives than you will ever be told. Tonight, tend your fire knowing the walls it works through, the strangers sleeping easier one house of life away. Then rest, quiet radiator of rooms unseen, and let the night carry your warmth along every party wall it can find. Chapter 33. The faces lit from within. Verena Marchwood made stained glass, and she pitied the people who judged her windows from the street in daylight. From outside, unlit, a great window is gray lead and dull promise, almost nothing. The same window at evensong, lit from within, is a garden of burning color that can stop a traveler's breath. Never judge glass from the cold side, she told her apprentices. Everything depends on whether you have seen it lit. Her burning windows reveal the change in your eyes that these nights have been quietly working, the one the title of this book promised. You are beginning to see faces the way Verena saw glass. The gray clerk, the sharp aunt, the clothes stranger on the evening bus. The old world read them from the cold side and filed them as dull lead. The new eyes know better. Every face is a window on a hearth, and what looks like grayness is nearly always a lit room seen from outside, or a dear room currently unlit, and either way, the lead is not the truth of the glass. Once a heart has learned this, it cannot unlearn it, and it never again meets a face without wondering gently what colors it holds when it burns. Caradoc Elmsley, a papermaker, tested the new eyes on his own dullest round, the mill's silent night porter, 10 years of knotted gray acquaintance. Caradoc simply began looking for the lit side, a question asked, an interest followed, and the window kindled. The porter, it unfolded, had sailed twice around the world and could name every star over the mill roof, and their midnight teas became the treasure of Caradoc's week. Within a season, he had found burning color behind half the gray faces of his life, and confessed to his wife, with some bewilderment, that the town appeared to have been secretly magnificent all along. His kindled porter teaches that dullness is almost always a lighting condition, and that new eyes make an old world unrecognizable. Tonight, choose one gray window from your daily round and resolve to look for its lit side tomorrow. One question, 1 minute of true attention. Then sleep and let your eyes finish their changing, for the world you wake to is about to become far more beautifully inhabited than the one you left. Chapter 34. The Bread in the Ashes. Tegwin ovened and baked the old way, hearth bread laid at night directly into the warm ash of a banked fire, covered and left. No watching, no turning, no anxious opening of doors, for there was no door. The night was the oven, and every morning of her long life she knelt, brushed back the gray, and lifted out the loaf, golden, finished, faithful. The fire works while the baker sleeps, she would say, tapping the crust. That is the whole covenant. She does her part at night. It does its part by morning. Her ash-baked loaves reveal how the deepest asking works. The asking this book has been teaching your heart without naming it. A desire of the heart, the companionship longed for, the family peace, the tenderness hoped toward, is dough. Worked by day, yes, needed with honest effort, but finished nowhere except in the covered warmth of the night. The untaught heart mixes its longing with worry and calls the mixture prayer, then digs it up hourly to check and wonders at a lifetime of raw mornings. The keeper's way is Tegwin's way. Shape the wish cleanly. Lay it in the banked warmth at the edge of sleep, wrapped in the feeling of it already granted. Cover it, and leave it with a baker's whole confidence to the oldest oven there is. Lysander Frome, a ring engraver, laid his loneliness into the ashes by this method. One clean wish, a companion to grow old beside, placed nightly into his last warm minutes, felt as already true, then left utterly alone until morning. He did his day work too, the lit window, the lamp, the feasts of this book, but the finishing he left to the nights. Within a season, a widowed music teacher brought him her mother's rings to mend, and stayed to talk and stayed. Already warming, he said later, when asked how he had known so quickly. It came out of the ashes finished. I only had to kneel. His finished loaf teaches that hearts, like bread, are completed in covered warmth, and that checking is the only way to ruin what the night bakes gladly. Tonight, shape one clean wish of the heart and lay it, already granted in feeling, into the banked warmth as sleep covers you. Then leave it wholly, and in the morning brush back the ash of waking gently, and see what the faithful old oven has begun. Chapter 35. The Language Beyond Words. Bronwyn Tregonning knitted shawls in a cottage above the harbor, and half the village's great occasions wore her work without a card or a speech attached. The shawl around the new mother's shoulders, the shawl on the widow's knees through the first winter. The shawl left folded on a doorstep after hard news, sender known to everyone and named by no one. Wool says it better, Bronwyn would murmur, needles going. Words tell a person they are loved. Warmth lets them feel it, which is the older sentence. Her speaking wool reveals the first language of love, the one beneath and before all vocabulary. The world has taught you to measure love in declarations, and declarations are fine lamps. But hearts were warmed for ages before eloquence, by presence, by touch, by soup arriving unasked, by the chair pulled nearer, by staying. And that old language remains the one every heart on earth is fluent in, including the hearts that words have failed, the shy, the wounded, the very old, the very young. The keeper learns both tongues and learns which one a cold evening calls for. Some nights need the sentence. Most nights need the shawl. Aldous Renshaw, a broom binder, courted the miller's daughter for a year without managing one fine speech, tongue-tied at every gate. What he managed instead was warmth in its native grammar. Her path swept before dawn on snowy mornings, her market basket quietly carried. Her cold father sat with through a long illness, presence, presence, presence. When she accepted him, her friends teased that he had never once said the word love. She only smiled. I never heard him say it, she agreed. I only ever felt warm when he was near, and cold when he was gone, and I decided to stop being cold. Her decision teaches that love's proof was never in the telling. It is in the temperature a person brings and leaves behind. Tonight, translate one love of yours out of words and into wool. Choose the shawl act, the soup, the swept path, the pulled chair, and set it for tomorrow. Then sleep inside the old language yourself, wrapped and warm and needing no sentence, and notice in the morning how much was said in the night without one word. Chapter 36. The Keeper's Rounds. Hesper Quayle kept the assembly rooms, and the last half hour of her every working night was a ritual the dancers never saw. Lamp by lamp, hearth by hearth, she walked the rounds, a touch to each mantel, a glance at each grate, a quiet word of thanks to each room for the evening it had held. The young caretaker who trained under her thought it fussy until he kept the rooms 1 month without it. Rounds are not fuss, Hesper told him, taking back her ring of keys. Rounds are how a house knows it is loved. Skip them, and the whole building begins very quietly to give up. Her nightly keys reveal what love actually is once the fireworks of its beginnings are past. Not a conquest held forever by one great victory, but rounds. The small nightly walk of the heart through its rooms, the beloved thanked, the friend remembered, the child's day asked after, the parent's voice sought weekly, each hearth touched, not grandly, regularly. The untended house does not burn down. It cools by unwalked corridors, one skipped round at a time, until its people live in 3 warm feet of a great cold building. The kept house glows to its farthest room, for no other reason than that its keeper walks. Bartimaeus Cole, a coal merchant who could heat the whole town and had somehow let his own house go cool, took up Hesper's rounds on her advice, 5 minutes at the end of each evening. His wife's shoulder touched in passing with a word of true thanks. His daughter's door knocked for a good night even through the sulking years. His old mother's lamp rung twice a week without fail. Nothing grand ever. Within weeks his wife said the house felt attended and could not explain the word and did not need to. The corridors were being walked again. The building had stopped giving up. His 5 minutes teach that love is not kept by intensity. It is kept by rounds, and rounds are small, and rounds are everything. Tonight, before sleep, walk yours. Room by room through the drowsing mind, each dear name touched once with thanks, each hearth glanced at with kindness. Then sleep, keeper of a well-walked house, and let every room of your life feel through the dark that someone came by. Chapter 37. The Fire That Forgives the Weather. From her stall of ribbons and silks, Jerusha Mott had weathered 40 years of market days, and she had one rule for the bitter mornings when the square turned gray and snappish, and every customer arrived with the cold in their voice. She did not argue with the weather. She did not take the north wind personally. She kept her brazier lit, her ribbons bright and her greeting even, and by noon, as often as not, the square had warmed itself at her corner. Weather is weather, she would say, straightening her silks. The stall that stays warm through it owns the afternoon. Her steady brazier reveals the discipline that saves love in its coldest passages. The people you love will have weather. The beloved goes sharp and distant for a season of their own private winter. The friend turns brief and gray under burdens they cannot yet name. And the untaught heart makes the oldest mistake, taking the front personally, matching cold with cold, moving its whole household into the other's storm and calling the shivering honesty. The keeper's way is Jerusha's. Let their weather be weather, real, respected, and not a verdict on you. Keep your own hearth burning at its usual hour and its usual warmth, visible through their sleet, so that when the front passes and fronts pass, there is a lit, unresentful room for them to come in from the cold too. Diggory Winscombe, a toy maker, had a brother whose storms came every winter, weeks of gruffness and slammed silence, and for years Diggory had either fought the weather or fled it, and either way both men froze. The year he tried the stallkeeper's rule, he simply stayed warm and stayed put. The Sunday visits kept. The tone kept level, the door kept open, the storm allowed to be a storm and never once treated as the brother's final word. When the thaw came that spring, it came all the way, the brother at his workbench one evening, wordlessly mending toys beside him, then at last talking. "You never closed up the stall," he said finally. "I kept track." His kept Sundays teach that steadiness through another's winter is one of love's highest arts, and that the warm room patiently held wins every thaw. Tonight, if someone dear is deep in weather, release the verdict you have been drafting about it, and check your own brazier instead. Then sleep with the stall lit and the door on the latch, and let the storm blow itself out against a warmth it cannot argue with. Chapter 38. The Inheritance of Warmth. Dorcas Winterskill had raised a family and then a lane, and in her last working years she taught one class only, the laying of fires, to any child who would kneel beside her. Paper, twigs, patience, breath, the banking at night, the raking at dawn. Her daughter once teased that it was a small curriculum for so devoted a teacher. Dorcas shook her head over the young heads at her hearth. "I am not teaching fires," she said. "I am teaching warm houses, 100 years from now, that I will never sit in." Her kneeling pupils reveal the horizon this book has been quietly walking you toward. Every skill of the keeper that you have gathered through these nights, the banking, the breath, the scoured pan, the open dovecote, the rounds, is inheritable, and it is inherited the way fire itself once was, hearth to hearth, hand to hand, by demonstration. The child who watches repair happen learns repair. The friend who is loved through a storm learns storm keeping. Every heart you warm properly becomes, in time, a warmer of hearts, and the arithmetic of that, played out across years and lanes and generations, is the closest thing to immortality a loving person is offered. Amyas Rowntree had been one of Dorcas's kneeling children, an orphan boy from the cold end of the lane, and the fire-laying was the least of what he took from her hearth. Years on, a father himself, he found her whole climate coming out of his own hands, the patience, the banked evenings, the good-night rounds, and his children thriving in a warmth whose maker they had never met. When his daughter, grown, kept the same rounds in her own far city rooms, Amyas wrote to the old woman one last letter. "Your fire is 4 houses from home now," he told her, "and burning in a town you will never see. It has your way of holding the heat." His traveling fire teaches that no warmth truly kept is ever confined to one lifetime. Keepers seed keepers, and the fire outlives every hand that tends it. Tonight, think of the hands your warmth came down through and thank one of them by name in the dark. Then think of the hands it is traveling toward, and sleep, ancestor of warm rooms you will never sit in, letting the night carry the fire one house further. Chapter 39. The Hearth You Are. Perpetua Winstay played the organ in the old church, and the strange thing about her music was where it seemed to come from. Visitors looked up at the pipes, but the parish knew better. The music came from Perpetua the way heat comes from a stove, continuously, unforced, as a property of what she had become, and it went on coming in her humming at the market, her way of listening, the temperature of any pew she sat in. She had practiced so long that the practicing had disappeared. She does not play warmth anymore, the old rector once said of her. She is the instrument now. Her overflowing music reveals the final change these nights have been making in you, the one you may already have begun to feel. There is a season early on when the keeper works the practices, chooses the ember, walks the rounds, warms the hands effortfully like scales. And there is a season, arriving quietly, when the practices dissolve into the practitioner, when the banking happens because you are a banker of hearts now, when rooms change temperature at your entrance without one deliberate act, when people warm their hands at you in queues and waiting rooms and cannot say why. You stop keeping a hearth. You are one. That is not a metaphor completing itself. It is a person completing herself. Crispin Amberwood, who made sealing wax in a shop of reds and golds, was told by 3 separate customers in 1 week that his counter was the easiest place in town to stand, and he went home puzzled, trying to recall what he had done to any of them. He had done nothing anymore. The years of nightly tending had simply finished their work, and the tending had become temperature, and the temperature had become him. He wrote that week, in the notebook he kept for his son, a single line. It seems a heart, kept long enough, stops being a room with a fire in it and becomes the fire in whatever room it enters. His single line teaches that the goal of all keeping is to disappear into what was kept, and that this disappearing feels from inside like finally being yourself. Tonight, do the practices lightly, for they are nearly yours for good. Then sleep and let the last seams dissolve, and notice in the morning or in some morning soon, the moment you stop carrying warmth because you have started being it. Chapter 40. The Heart That Never Loves the Same Again. In the small stone chapel above the town, there had burned for 200 years a lamp that was never allowed to go out, and for the last 50 of them, its keeper was Evangeline Wintermere. Pilgrims climbed the hill to see the famous flame, and stayed instead for the famous keeper, an old woman of such settled radiance that people wept near her without knowing why. On her last evening of service, a young successor asked for the secret, expecting oils and wicks and schedules. Evangeline looked a long time at the flame she had kept for half a century and gave the secret whole. "Child," she said, "the lamp was never the difficulty. The keeping changed the keeper. Tend any fire for 50 years, and one day you will find that it has spent all that time tending you." Her lifetime reveals the quiet ending of this book, which is not an ending at all. Somewhere in these 40 nights without ceremony, the promise of the title began coming true in you, and it is important that you understand what kind of promise it was. Your heart will never love the same way again, not because it found a new person, though it may, and not because the old wounds were erased, though they are softening in the ash beds even now. It will never love the same way again because it has changed trades. It has stopped being a beggar at other people's fires, hoping to be warmed, hoping to be chosen, cold or warm at the world's whim. It has become a keeper, and keepers love differently forever after. Without grasping because fires need air, without terror of winters because they know how to bank, without rationing because they have counted the candles and found the arithmetic kind. Warm first, warm steadily, warm outward, the way a hearth loves without asking and without ending. Evangeline climbed down the hill that night, her successor lighting the lamp behind her, and the town below, if it had looked up, would have seen what pilgrims had been climbing toward all along, not the famous flame in the chapel, but the greater one, walking home slowly through the dark lanes, warming the whole hill as it went. Tonight, there is no new practice, for you are carrying all of them, banked and breathing. Simply lie down as a keeper lies down, hand on the chest, ember chosen, ash drawn over, house walked, doors open, and let sleep take the lamp from your hands the way the successor took Evangeline's faithfully and for good. The fire is kept, the keeper is kept, and morning is already warming on the other side of the night. If you enjoyed this audiobook, I created a free ebook version for you. It's the first link in the description and in the pinned comment below this video. Conclusion. The morning of the warm heart. The night is nearly over now, and the house of your heart is not the house it was when you pressed play. Walk it once more softly and count what is burning. The ember chosen and banked. The hearthstone leveled with one kind sentence. The match sheltered, the kindling laid in order, the air left between the logs. The drafts named and stopped, the flue cleared, the borrowed coal accepted without shame, the lamp set in the window. The wet logs of old grievance left unburned, the cold room's door unlatched by inches, the low fires breathed and not pokered, the ash of endings thanked and spread on the garden beds. The one warm room defended, the mirror above the mantel furnished kindly, the two logs laid a hand's width apart. And through the shared rooms of your life, the warm parlor, the undivided candle, the warmed hands, the stranger's stove, the chalked hearth, the raked waltz, the scoured pan, the set stool, the open dovecote, the lit table, the pocket coal, the party walls, the faces seen from the lit side, the bread in the ashes, the wool that speaks, the rounds, the steady stall, the traveling fire, and the keeper you are quietly becoming. You were never cold-hearted. You were an unkept hearth, which is a different thing entirely, and the difference was never your worth. It was only ever the tending, and the tending is yours now every night for good. So let the last banking of this book be the gentlest. Choose the ember, feel it warm. Draw the ash of sleep across it with complete trust, for you know the covenant now. The fire you bank at night is the warmth you wake to. And in the morning, lie still one extra moment before rising, hand on your chest, and notice what is there. Then notice it again at the breakfast table, in the first faces of the day, in the way rooms seem to lean toward you now. It may feel as though the world has grown warmer overnight. It has not, and it does not need to have. You listened while sleeping, and your heart will never love the same way again, because the one who fell asleep was hoping to be warmed, and the one who wakes is carrying the fire. If these nights have warmed you, subscribe, so the next book can find you the way this one did, like a lamp in a window on a long road. Sleep now, keeper. The ember is chosen. The ash is drawn. And somewhere on the other side of the dark, morning is kneeling at your grate, ready to breathe. If you enjoyed this audiobook, I handpicked this next book, which will change your life.